Welcome to the HerStory Circle podcast, the podcast that brings you the extraordinary tales of everyday women who are changing the world. I'm your host, Saoidhbh McGreal, and I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Every week, we dive into the lives, challenges, and triumphs of women from all four corners of the globe. We're here to inspire, enlighten, and connect, sharing stories that uplift and empower. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and join us as we explore the incredible journeys of women shaping our future. This is Her Story, where every woman's voice matters. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the HerStory Circle. This is Saoidhbh McGreal here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating young woman. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us today.
Is Katie Saoidhbh McGreal. I am currently based in Galicia in northern Spain. I've literally just moved here. And I was raised in Dublin in Ireland. I am the second oldest of four. Yes, I should think about that. Second oldest of four girls. And my dad is a business owner. He's obsessed with work. He used to always say that once you find a job that you love, you will never work a day in your life. But the reality of that is actually just that he worked all the time. Like all of the time. And I think about it now and I wonder why he had me and why he bothered to have children, because he really wasn't very interested in us. And my mother was a teacher and then she went into work with my dad. I say that I wonder why my dad bothered to have me. I also had that same thought about my mother because neither of my parents were very nice to me. I was the second oldest. And my oldest sister was the golden child. She was fantastic, could not do anything wrong. We always had to look after her and look out for her. I remember my mum told me repeatedly that, excuse me. Oh, Christ, hang on. I remember my mum told me repeatedly that I had loads of confidence, but she didn't. And we had to look out for her and make sure that she was able to do things and support her and help her. And I remember standing in the kitchen being like, what, did somebody see my confidence? I can't find it. But it was just always following everything that she did. And then I have two younger sisters who were really loud. I felt really, just really not seen and not heard. Nobody ever really cared about what I said or how I felt. Nobody ever asked anything about how I felt. I went to secondary school following in my sister's footsteps. We all went to the same school. And I remember I think Orla had left the school a year and I was in my final year, so she would have been 2 years out. And it was dinner time and I was saying that I had gone into school late that day because I just hadn't been bothered getting up early. And one of the teachers had seen me and she said that when she saw that I wasn't in class, she knew that I definitely had an excuse and there was no way I was just skipping school. And I said this at dinner and my sister goes, oh, that was because of me. That's because I was so great. So yeah, that was because of me. And I remember thinking, but I was 6 years in the school as well. What? And then I went on to college and I did business through Irish. And I did business because that was what I should do. My dad worked in business. My sister did business. And it was very much, this is just, I have to just do what everybody else does and I have to follow along what everybody else does. And then for my first year of college, my oldest sister and I went to the same university. And for my first year of college, she was on Erasmus. And I think that was probably one of the best things to ever happen for me because she wasn't there. We didn't hear about her. Nobody else knew her. And then when she came back, she kind of like took over again. And like I wanted to not live in my parents' house anymore. And she found a house for us to live in. We shared a room and it made sense because she was because we were paying less rent because we were sharing a room. But the first time I ever had my own room was when I moved to South Korea. I taught English in South Korea, and I went over there and I had my own flat. It was great and I loved it. But my sister came to visit and she took over. She like treated my flat as if it was hers and never gave me my own space. And anytime I ever questioned any of this, anytime I said to my sister or to my sister or to my parents, or would usually have been my mother because my dad wasn't around, that I didn't like something that my sister had done, I'd be given out to, and I'd be told, oh, we need to look after her. You can't say that about her. Oh no, that's not okay. And I remember once I had like a really big revelation. Somebody had said to me that my sister, I was led to believe had meningitis until when I was born. I found out recently that actually she was better by the time I was born, but I didn't know that. But I was telling my friend this, that no matter what, I couldn't seem to do right from doing wrong. Every time anything came up with my sister, I got into trouble for it and I was given out. I always describe my childhood as I spent a lot of time being grounded, which was I was in trouble and I wasn't allowed to go out and do anything. And when I thought about it, I was like, but I was such a good child. I don't understand. But it was because I would say or do something that my parents didn't like because I was not supporting my sister, or my sister lied. I found out recently also she was a liar. She would tell my parents I had done something, and I was so used to being in trouble all the time that I was just like, okay, yeah, cool. I remember doing a meditation and I was brought back to a time when I was about 3 or 4 years old, and I was standing under a dining room table and my mother was there and she was pointing at me like this and she was telling me that I was a nasty child. And when I was in the meditation, I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what was going on, but slowly as I let it kind of come out, my grandmother and my sister were there. And once I realized my sister was there, I was like, oh, she was lying. My sister said that I did something and I got into trouble for it. And that was basically a lot of what my childhood was like. I was just in trouble all the time. And then as soon as I felt I was able to, I got a job on the other side of the country. So I moved to Galway, but I was home every weekend. I had to come home every weekend. And my friend was saying to me, I remember a few years later, why do you go back so often? And it didn't, like, I couldn't comprehend not going back that often. I was back at least every other weekend. But even that wasn't enough. I had my younger sister shout at me across the kitchen once saying, you're never here, you're always leaving. And at that time I was there every other weekend. But I couldn't comprehend how my friend could not go home, because this was just normal. This was what happened. I always had to go and visit home. And if I didn't visit home or I wasn't there enough, whatever that was, they would tell me about it. They would make comments. Right before the pandemic hit, my friend asked if I wanted to go and stay with her. She just bought a house in Dublin and asked if I wanted to stay with her over my birthday weekend. And I knew my family would not be okay with this, and they were not. My mother didn't react really, but she told my sister, and my sister yelled at me. She shouted at me. I was probably like 33 maybe at the time, but my sister was like, why are you not coming home to us? Why are you going over there? What are you going to do with her? And I was like, but I want to go and see Amy on my birthday. And then months later, I did go get home again because it was after the pandemic. And my dad made comments about that friend and was like, so how is she? Oh, you're not staying with her. And I remember being really confused because nothing was ever directly said. And I remember my therapist saying to me, you must have been very confused all the time as a child. It sounds like your childhood was very confusing. And I didn't know at the time because I just didn't realize. I believe people when they say things. I believe that what they're saying is true until I have a reason to not believe them. So I just always went on, like, accepted that what they had said was true, even when I now know that it wasn't. Or I would have been there when my sister would have done something bold. I would have been there, would have seen her do it. And then she'd turn around and tell my mother that it was me who had done it. And I would just accept what she said because she said it. So she mustn't be telling a lie. She had to be telling the truth because she said it. So like thinking about it now, yes, confusing. But at time it was so normal. And that's the worst part about the being treated really badly from your family of origin, because you don't know that it's unusual to be treated badly. My friends with air quotes, treated me terribly. I had such terrible friendships, and I didn't know that it was wrong. I didn't know there was anything wrong with it. I just let it be and was like, oh, this is just normal. This is what happens. And that's the really sad part about growing up with family or with people that treat you really badly. You don't know that people should treat you better.
Katie, you're describing a situation that unfortunately is more common than it's uncommon. You know, most families are so dysfunctional. There's layers and layers that can occur in any given family. So, can you share how your experience with the parental abuse shaped your healing journey? Because it sounds like you've been on this journey for a while.
Yes, I have. I think it began when I first started meditating, which would have been like 9 years ago. But I didn't know at the time there was anything wrong with family. I went into my first meditation class, and the reason that I kept going back was because I had found this sense of peace that I didn't know was possible. I remember loving, like, my favorite place as a child was underneath the water in the pool because it was quiet. But I couldn't comprehend, or I didn't know that that was because there was loads of noise outside and this was quiet. So when I first went to meditation, I was like, it's possible to feel, it's possible to feel quiet. It's possible for there not to be noise all the time, and like that it can come from within me. And then I got very into meditation. Basically, I've done 10-day silent retreats. I've taught meditation. And I think it was the noticing my own body, noticing how I felt. And that any time that I then, at the beginning of when I cut my family off, when I would think, oh, am I making this up? Is this real? It was always coming back to my body. How do I feel? And I would leave their house and I'd feel bad. I would be in my own space in Galway where I lived at the time, and I felt better and I felt a lot calmer, and I was like, okay, right. And so the meditation and the mindfulness brought me back into my body in a way I'd never been before. It taught me how to identify my emotions and my feelings, which meant that I could identify how I felt when I was around certain people. And therefore I was able to go, feel good in this place, don't feel good in this place.
You had a choice.
And that then, yeah, but it also then brought up the chaos of, oh my God, I don't feel good around my family, but it's family, because I was raised with this idea of it's family. Everything gets dropped because of family. We must always support family no matter what they do to us. So I think it took me probably a really long time to know what to do with not liking being around them.
Yeah.
But I had to always be around them because they're family. And what do you do with that?
Wow. So what was the most difficult part of breaking the silence about family estrangement?
Oh, I didn't know where that question was going. So when I first cut my family off, it's been 3 years now, and I wrote a book about it about 6 months ago.
Wow.
So when I first cut them off, I lived with so much shame. I was terrified that people would ask where I was from or ask anything about family. Irish people are obsessed with where you're from. So I would be in situations and they'd be like, oh, where are you from? And I alternated between Galway and Dublin. I was living in Galway at the time, but I would never say I was from Galway. I was really specific with my wording, and I was terrified of people. I would never bring family up, but I was terrified that other people would bring family up. So it was really... it was so scary because I was afraid that they would bring family up. They would find out that I'd cut my family off, and my thought was, well, they'll say, what's wrong with you that your family treated you like that? Because that's what my family would do. So what I did with very few select people was I dropped a few hints. Like I mentioned something about not seeing my mother, or like my sister being mean to me, or like just not seeing family. And I would see how they would react. And then I'd be like, okay, you didn't react really badly, so now I can say a little bit more. But actually writing the book was so cathartic because I got all of my stories and all of the things I had to say physically out of my body. And then I thought that was it. I thought once it was published, that was it. I'd walk away and it'd be fine. but I did not realize how incredibly powerful it would be for me and how healing it would be for me to be able to talk to people about it. Now, I will bring family up. I will tell anybody. I don't care. I have no shame about it anymore. And that has been the best part about writing about it and about talking about it. But I didn't see that coming. I didn't know that was coming, but it's really been, I would actually go through the whole thing 10 times again just to feel that relief of going, oh, I actually don't care what other people think anymore. Oh, wow, this is great.
So what inspired you to create Solas Relaxation, and what does solace mean to you?
Solace is the Irish word for light.
Okay.
And I was teaching I started practicing mindfulness about 9 years ago, I think I said. And about a year later, I had experienced so much benefit and peace from meditation that I knew that I wanted to teach other people. And I specifically wanted to teach children. And I didn't know at the time how significant that was for me. But I wanted to teach children because I thought if I had had meditation, my life would have looked very differently. I don't now think that is very true, but I do still think meditation from a young age can really help people because it teaches you skills you can use then in later life. But I also wanted to make the classes fun and to make sure that the children enjoyed practicing mindfulness and meditation, as well as learning ways to cope with stressful life. And when I started teaching, I don't know why, but for some reason I was like, oh, I can't just do it under my own name. I have to have a company name. So a friend of mine actually was in a meditation class with me, and we were chatting about what name I would use. And I knew that I wanted to use the word relaxation, but I wanted a first word that would be easy to read in different languages, but I wanted it to be an Irish word. And he was the one that came up with the word light and solace, because he was doing a meditation and we were imagining that we were walking in a forest, and he said that he could see the light of the sun coming through the trees. And when he said it, I was like, oh, let's go with that. So it's about teaching people to find the light within themselves, but doing it through relaxation.
Oh, that's so beautiful. That is absolutely beautiful. So what are some of the common misconceptions about narcissism or emotionally abusive parenting?
So it's hard for me to say because I was in it on one side of it. What I was always afraid of was that people would say I was the one who had caused it. My parents would always, like, I remember my last gasp phone call to my mother. So on this phone call, I thought, okay, I'm going to talk to you. And if you are able to give me anything at all, like accept any accountability, I will go back to you. And this was very much at the end of our relationship. And I said to her, yes, so I've noticed that you haven't really been calling me very much. Well, Katie, and she told me she was going through her phone log while we were on the phone, and she said, I rang you on this date and I called you on this day, and you said, yep, these are all of the times. That's just not true. It's just not true. And I was like, oh, okay, that's great. Okay. And then she told me that maybe if I visited home more, then she would, I don't know, she would call me more or something. I don't know what the logic was there. But it was always putting it back on me. I remember getting off that phone and thinking, okay, I don't really know what just happened there. But so I sent my friend a voice note and I said, my brain is like cotton wool. When I speak to them, I just don't have cognitive thought. And I know now that's because I was in a stress response. And when you're in a stress response, you can't think. But I sent a voice note to my friend and I said, she said this, I said this, she said that, I said that. And my friend came back to me and said, so basically, you told her that you didn't like something and she turned around and that it was your fault. Oh, that's rough. That really sucks. And that was like a very common thing. Anytime I would say something to like a sibling and be like, hey, I didn't like this thing you did. I remember my sister, she was really, really awful to me. So I was staying in my parents' house at the time. I got up and left, and I blocked her on social media, and like she couldn't message me except via normal text message. And one day, and then when she noticed, I got so by a few days later, I got a text from her, and she said, "Oh my God, you're so childish. I can't believe that you just blocked me." And I replied with, "Well, you were actually really mean to me. This is what you did, and that's why I didn't like it, and I just need some space." "Okay, yeah, well, 6 months ago you said this thing to me, and I didn't like that." And I was like, 6 months ago? Why didn't you say it 6 months ago? Why are oh my God, I'm so confused.
Oh gosh. Yeah, that is just terrible.
And you can't fight it.
So how can people start setting boundaries with toxic family members?
Ooh. So what I did was I started going homeless. From when I was right after college, to be honest, I wanted to go to college not in the city I grew up in, but my mother said that it's so sad when people go to college in a city that they didn't grow up in, because it means they usually end up living in the city far away. So I stayed in Dublin. I went to college in Dublin because my mother wanted me to, and I ended up afterwards got a job out of Dublin, and I went to Galway, and I would go back. I went back really often, but I think the first time I properly set a boundary, so I started with, I had 2 separate siblings at different times that I stopped speaking to because they were really mean. They just weren't nice to me. And both times my parents forced me to talk to them again. They just told me that I had to talk to them, and they kept saying it, and they kept saying it, or would make fun of me and all of these things. So I went back and spoke to them. But this last time, I just stopped going home as often. I remember saying to them at dinner one day, I was like, I am exhausted. I can't keep coming back for everything, so I'm not going to come back as often. And I thought I would get a reaction, but I got no reaction. But a few months later, then that was when my mum then stopped ringing me as much. But you've got to be really strong in what you know. You have to know yourself a lot. And really strong in what you want. And therapy really helped. And not because I've heard of therapists that deal with abusive parental relationships and like narcissistic abuse, and that my therapist didn't, but it helped me to untangle all of the thoughts. And I would like go to her and I would say things about things that happened, and I would see a reaction from her, and I'd be like, "Oh, okay, that wasn't normal. Okay, cool." And you kind of start to get a ground, like a ground or baseline of what is okay behavior and what's not. Because when you've grown up in this, being treated terribly is just normal. So you don't know that what people are doing is bad. So therapy I would recommend. I'd also recommend meditation, because I always do, but journaling has really helped as well. Which is really, I think, where the book started from, because just writing out all of your thoughts, and a little bit like with therapy, but maybe even in a more effective way, even you are untangling your thoughts, and you're able to like look back at what you wrote and go, "Oh, okay, that's what I thought about that thing, or that's how I felt about in a certain situation." And it just helps to take things out of your head. And then with regards to the boundaries, you just have to know that they're going to push back. Like, I stopped speaking to my parents, and my father arrived on my front door, and I was terrified. My heart was pounding, but I went to the front door and I opened it, and he said, "Do you want to talk about it?" And I said, "No, I'm doing something." "Oh, right." And I closed the door, locked it, and I sat back down where I had been, and I pretended to keep watching TV. I didn't. I was too busy shaking, but I knew I didn't want to talk to him. I knew that it wasn't going to benefit me to talk to him. But I also then remember another time I got an email from my mother, and it said, "Would you like to meet for a coffee?" And my immediate reaction was, "Yeah, I would love that." Because it would be great to meet my mother for a coffee. But I also knew that it would be really bad for me. What would I get out of it? How was this going to benefit me? And I needed to see, to be honest, at this stage, I can't see myself ever speaking to them, but if I was to at the time, I would need to see significant changes, but also them taking accountability and them acknowledging. But I think for people that are listening that are like, "Oh, I would love to do that," accept that they're never going to take accountability and know that
Yeah.
they're not going to change. So the only thing that you have control over is you. We
Yeah.
can't force other
Yeah.
people to change. I remember, and I feel and I felt kind of embarrassed to realize this in my 30s, but if the other person in the relationship, if there's a relationship with two people and the other person isn't willing to make any effort, the relationship is not going to work.
No,
It's
it
just not.
won't go anywhere.
And I genuinely remember not realizing that until the very end of the relationship with my mother, when I had just lost interest in her. I was like, I have done all of this work. I have made all of the effort. I have tried to talk to you about it, and you're just not giving me anything. Because
Mm,
even when I said to her, hey, like, you've been saying for the past 6 months that you really want to come and visit, and you haven't come to visit. And then she
right.
still was like, oh yeah, but this, because I have this thing to do, or I have this. Well, don't tell me that you're going to come to visit and then complain that I'm not going back to you. It's such double standards.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is just fascinating.
Totally.
So
Yeah.
let me ask you this. What role does validation play in emotional recovery?
A very, very big one. Because I felt completely disconnected at home.
Yeah.
Anytime I would say, oh, hey, this thing happened, they would tell me that it didn't happen. So I would be then thinking, oh, maybe I'm crazy. Like, I what's going on with
Yeah.
my head? Because, like, what? This thing just happened and you're telling me that it didn't happen? But even to have somebody say, oh, I can see that you're really upset. I was on the phone when I was
Yes.
probably maybe 14, 15. I was on the phone with a friend from school and I was crying. I don't remember what it was about, but I was crying. And this friend said, go and find someone to hug. And I was like, what do you mean go and find someone to hug? Go and like find your mum and like you need a hug because you're crying. And I was like,
Yes.
I remember actually saying to her, I'm not crying. But anyway,
Oh.
I also remember during that phone call, my mother walked through the room and saw me crying and just went into the next room and just completely ignored me. So I wasn't allowed to, I'd never thought that I was allowed to cry when I was at home because I always had to have a reason. And my
Right.
reason always felt really stupid. So to have somebody say to you, when you've been grown up in a family like that where nobody pays any attention to you, nobody really cares, and then to have somebody suddenly go, I hear what you're saying, and I can not even identify with it, but for somebody to say, I can see that you're upset, and I can empathize with the fact that you're upset. It's so nice. It's just,
Oh,
it
wow.
makes you feel part of the world or part of something instead of just completely isolated. And you're here with all of your emotions, but nobody else ever has any emotions. And even if they do have emotions, they still don't care about yours. Because anytime I would say to, something would happen to somebody and I would say, something like I can kind of recognize what's happening there. No, you can't. No, this is only mine. And it felt we were fighting for attention and we were fighting for love because there was only a tiny
Yeah.
amount of it at home. So anytime somebody else was going through something, it was all about them all the time, but it never felt like it was ever all about me unless I was in trouble. And that was, I now know, because my sister lied a lot. Or even just I said something. And I think that was a big thing with my family. I would say things and they didn't like it. And the things I said were the truth. I tell the truth and I don't. My mum would tell me I'm blunt, I'm mean, and I can be really cutting and harsh. And I was therefore terrified to speak because I didn't know what she was talking about. I would be like, but I would have stated what other people weren't saying, or I
Yeah.
would have said the truth. And therefore, when my mother tells me I'm really harsh and cutting and mean, I was like, how? What? I didn't.
You
I
weren't
just
even
said the
aware of
thing.
it.
No, and it was really
Oh,
hard then because I was afraid to open my mouth. I was like, okay, well, we'll just have to shut up then because I'm going to be mean and blunt. And I was always told that being blunt was really bad. And she
yeah.
would use the word nasty a lot. I was being nasty.
So, how did you build a global community from such a personal pain?
I think by doing just what I said, by speaking the truth, by
Mm,
just stating things as they are.
yeah.
And I think because people don't talk about parental abuse very much. I would like to think that people are talking about it more, but I kind of think that that's just within my own world that I can see that. But I think external to that, people don't talk about parental abuse even now. And I think I don't know how to not tell the truth. I don't know how to state things as they are. So I think that that's just what I've just been like, this is something that has happened for me and it's been really awful. And I know that other people can learn from it and can feel validated from it, because I know when I was going through it, I was quite lucky actually. I had 2 people that I can think of, maybe 2 or 3 that had parental relationships that were quite similar to mine. So I did have some people to talk to, but I know that a lot of people don't. I used to listen to the podcast, I can't remember what it's called now. But it was a podcast where they would read out letters from people that were in emotionally abusive relationships with their family. And it was so validating, because I would listen to it and would go, oh my God, that's just like her. Oh my God, my dad does that too. And you just felt so seen after a huge time and a lifetime of never being seen and always being forgotten about. I always felt very forgotten.
So let's finish off with the last question. What advice would you give to someone who feels ashamed of going no contact with a parent?
There is a lot less shame than you think there is. If you can go no contact and your reason for not going no contact is because you're afraid of what other people will think, it's not as bad as you think it'll be. People are a lot nicer than your family. And that's what I've really learned, that they're so much nicer than my family. I've always expected for people to say that I was obviously the problem. And like I called my book, You Were Never the Problem, because I want other people to know that they are not the issue, but your family are going to make you feel like you are the problem. And if you could just be better or do things differently. But if you want to go no contact, keep your circle small, say it only to people that you do trust, but believe me, there is so not nearly as much shame as you think there is. And once you speak it out loud, shame can't live. That's what Brene Brown teaches, that when we speak our truth, when we speak things out loud, there's no space for shame, because shame can only live in the darkness. So when you speak it and when you say it, it's going to
bring
go
it out into the light. Well,
yes.
Thank you so much, Katie, for coming online and sharing your story with us today. Absolutely enlightening. I have your website at the bottom of the screen. Is that how people can connect with you or join your community?
Yes. And then I'm on Instagram and Facebook as well. Solas Relaxation there as well.
Fantastic. And thank you to everybody who tuned in today. The Her Story Circle is not just a podcast. We're a social impact movement that brings you the stories and voices of women from all over the world. We share our stories to uplift you, to inspire you, to energize you, but most importantly, to equip you with tools, with skills to take you from where you are now to where you're trying to go. So tune in again tomorrow when I interview yet another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world. And Katie, thanks again for the interview. Don't go away. Thank you for tuning into the Her Story Circle podcast. I hope today's story has inspired you to believe in the power of our stories and the difference you can make in the world when you use your voice. I'm Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a rich tapestry of diverse perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these stories with more listeners. Follow us on social media by looking for the Her Story Circle podcast for more updates. And join us tomorrow for another episode filled with courage, resilience, and empowerment. Remember, your story matters, and together we're building a stronger, more inclusive world. Until next time, keep making her story. Thank you.